Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well. Today, we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Deadpool and Wolverine once again completely dominate everybody at the box office. And again, not just being impressive as a rated R movie, though that is where it is definitely the most impressive, but also it's going up against other films from Disney, other films from Marvel that were in the PG-13 or even PG category. And so that's just, again, speaking to how impressive these numbers actually are, with a estimated 54% drop from week 1 to week 2 domestically, which for any movie like this is pretty insane. If you really go back in time and look at some of the other more recent, especially MCU movies, we typically see drops in that 60% plus range. And so for the fact for us to get a 54% drop in the second weekend of release is just really darn impressive. And so we'll talk about what that actually means for the longevity of the box office when it comes to that movie. We'll also try to put it up against where a film like Inside Out 2 has been also performing very, very well, continues to add to its overall numbers, and where this also falls in with newer films like The Purple Crayon, Harold and the Purple Crayon, I should say, and the new film from M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, the film Trap, which opened to, I guess you could say, higher than expected numbers, but again, with that budget, it's still a little too early to tell on where this film ultimately will land. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, loud that fire button over on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell. That way you get notified every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So apologies if I'm a little bit more spacey than usual, as I am right now dealing with illness around the house, and has now, of course, hit me, as it's often doing, as it often does when you have kids. I got kids. But as you can see, Tony at Deadline is pretty excited because, hey, we've got some life at the box office, at least for the time being, with Deadpool Wolverine making $97 million in its second weekend of release. That's right, you heard that correctly. $97 million in its second weekend of release. This is not just impressive for, as I mentioned before, a rated R movie. This is just impressive for almost any film in the modern era, where we don't typically have releases like this anymore. This film also, just kind of going to jump ahead to this already because of how impressive it is, this film has already topped $824 million at the global box office in just 2 weeks, meaning this film is going to hit $1 billion by or before weekend 3, which would put it around the same kind of tracking that we saw for Inside Out 2. Now, one of the big differences, of course, between them, not only is it because of a rated R movie versus a PG movie, and so there's differences in audiences there, availabilities of those audiences and things like that, but also the fact that Inside Out 2, especially when it comes to its international totals, had a delayed release structure, and so it was able to, and continues to be able to, add on over time, with now only recently, just this past weekend actually, getting released in Japan. And so we're going to see some of those numbers probably get a little bit higher for that film, which already crossed 1.5 billion. But what this means is that to say that 1.5 billion is not on the table right now for Deadpool Wolverine, I think would be a bit of a foolish statement because of where these numbers actually stand. And we'll go, as deep as we can as far as the comparisons between this and a PG film like Inside Out 2, which again is right now currently the highest grossing film of 2024 and has a very good chance of being the highest grossing film of 2024. Again, if I had to put money on it, I would say ultimately Inside Out 2 has the better chance. However, I would also say, and I've been mentioning this and using this expression for a long time now, the sky really is the limit for Deadpool and Wolverine, and these numbers are continuing to show that. Again, having a 54% drop in the domestic market from your first to second weekend as a huge, big budget Marvel film, rated R Marvel film to boot, it's just darn impressive, okay? There's just no other way around it at this point in time, and so it's going to have to keep on being stressed as such. Going into the actual numbers at thenumbers.com, by the way, I don't know what's going on with the numbers because they their site is having some issues. As you can see, maybe if you cannot see, it says not secure because apparently there's some issue going on with the site where it says it's not safe to go to, and so I have to go through this warning thing, and they already shut down about a week or two ago. They shut down their comparison side of their site, and also none of the numbers are uploading in my chart either, and so don't know exactly what's going on with the numbers. And Box Office Mojo, as of the recording of this video, had not updated any of these numbers yet, which is, again, one of the many reasons why I do not prefer that platform. So, hey, the numbers, please get these things fixed because it impacts the videos that I can make in this way. But as you can see, again, Deadpool Wolverine, 54% drop. This film has already made $395.5 million at the domestic, so roughly $400 million in just 2 weeks. Now, the reason why I keep bringing up Inside Out 2 is because if you go over to boxofficemojo.com, you'll notice something that's very, very interesting, right? Where was Inside Out 2 by the end of its second weekend domestic? And remember, this did get an early release. This actually got a several day opening release, right? It had one of these early release structures. And by its second weekend, the film had gotten to $356 million at the domestic box office. Okay, as I mentioned before, as the last time I updated this had not been updated as of yet. But according to the numbers over on thenumbers.com, $395 million is currently where Deadpool Wolverine stands. So that means right now, Deadpool Wolverine is tracking well above where even a film like Inside Out 2 is doing at the domestic box office. Now, there, of course, are a lot of things that we just don't know. It's really hard to get the comparisons on the actual day-to-day numbers because we don't have that comparison chart that makes things so easy with thenumbers.com. If I actually had the time to put into making my own chart with the raw data available, I would, but it doesn't really matter as much because even if the film does not hold up as strongly in those day-to-day numbers, right, in the daily, weekly, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday box office numbers, if it is still able to make up those amounts of money, right, that amount of money that Inside Out 2 might have the edge on, might have the advantage on, and if it's able to continue to have these kinds of holes, and I'd mentioned this before, this movie does not have any actual competition in this space as far as the more adult, oriented demographic. It doesn't really have any competition until the film Romulus, Alien Romulus comes out. And even that one, I think we could argue whether that would even really be much competition for the film. And as you all know, I've always said that competition really doesn't make or break movies, mostly because if a film is really, really good, or if a film is getting a lot of attention, a lot of positive word of mouth, if people are wanting to go see a film, they're going to go out and see it, regardless of whether or not there are films competing at the box office or not. The only thing that competition really helps at the box office is the actual individual theaters. And so that's why I love competition, because it does allow for theaters to make a lot more money. It allows theaters to keep on running. But at the same time, this is, again, a factor that's going to be something that we're going to continue to look at in this space, especially as Deadpool and Wolverine continues at this point to be a much higher, much faster grossing film than, again, Inside Out 2. Just to go ahead and show you that, too, we're going to jump to my chart because we love charts here in OMB Reviews, just to give you an idea of how impressive this number is. By the end of the second weekend globally, so not just domestic here, but globally, Inside Out 2 was at $724 million. Now, again, this film did get a slow release internationally, and so that is something that can definitely be brought into the equation. But the fact that Deadpool Wolverine currently has a $100 million advantage against where Inside Out 2 was, and Inside Out 2 is currently at $1.5 billion, and the film, Deadpool Wolverine, is still holding strong, even in the domestic market. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to not look at those numbers, look at the facts, and say, yeah, I think $1.5 billion is on the table for this kind of movie, right? And we'll go again into the actual projections when we get to that portion of the video, but just to give you kind of a heads up about what we're talking about why this movie, Deadpool Wolverine, is just so darn impressive. Going back to the list of the top 5 of the box office, Twisters continuing to hold on as well. 35% hold here, dropping from 161 screens, getting close to $200 million domestic. Remember, the thing that's going to hold this movie back is its budget. This movie has performed very, very well, and I know that there's some who have already said, hey, they've just recently announced that they're going to be putting it on to VOD sale very soon. It's going to be put onto digital very, very soon, and that's going to hurt its box office. Well, here's the thing. This movie was already doing better than it had any right to, right? If you think about where people were when the trailers for this movie were coming out, where people were when they even thought of a sequel to the 90s Twister movie was coming out, it really wasn't a lot of hype. It wasn't until the movie actually was released, when people actually had fun with it, and word of mouth was able to continue even to this day to push this film, keep this film going forward, that you actually had any type of box office that could actually make up for the amount of money that they actually put in and sank into this movie. And so I look to that and think, okay, I think that you're not going to see much difference once this gets released on VOD, because again, good films or films that people actually want to see in theaters can go up against even a VOD. I think we saw this especially with a film like Five Nights at Freddy's, where everyone's like, oh yeah, this got a day-and-date release on Peacock, and so therefore it's just not going to do much of anything. And sure enough, it actually had a very high opening weekend at the actual box office, and it actually performed pretty well, especially for a, quote, day-and-date release model. And so again, that's the reason why the movie itself, how it's marketed, things of that nature, are things that you have to always account for, and are sometimes difficult to account for, because there's a lot of factors these days that impact whether a film can be successful or not. I'm not denying that Twisters is a box office success. It's rather a point of, at the theatrical release, it's not going to be able to have enough steam to make its money back based off of how much they put into the film. So again, it's going to make a lot of money on VOD, I imagine, once they sell the rights, the streaming rights to whatever platform Maybe it'll be onto Netflix or whatever it might be. They're going to make money on that. So, the studio Universal, they're going to make money back on this production. The real question is going to be is at what point along the way does it happen? As I said, even with these strong holds, it's not going to happen theatrically. But now that you have a VOD release, that's going to be extra cash. And eventually you'll have the actual streaming rights when the streaming services get into the equation. That'll also have an impact on it down the road as well. Coming to the number 3 spot is from Warner Brothers. This is the new film from M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong as I like to call him, which is the new film Trap. Personally, I did not like how the trailer kind of gave away a part of the movie. I know some people say, well, that's kind of the point of the trailer, because the point of the movie is more about the chase. It's more about, will this guy actually get out of this arena? I'll try and keep it as vague as I can. I just do think that what we know about that person would have been a lot more interesting if we did not know that going into it. If the trailer instead had been saying, okay, this guy's getting chased, why is he getting chased? And then all of a sudden you go into the movie and you find out why. I don't know. I feel like that would have been a twist that would have been well worth seeing in theaters, but a movie that I don't really have a whole lot of interest in seeing, though I've heard it's a lot better than what many people had expected going into it. It's been getting some very high ratings on critic lists and other platforms like it. Despicable Me 4 is still also in the conversation here, dropping only 23%, $11.2 million. So again, crossing $300 million in the domestic market. Inside Out 2 at $6.7 million. And its 8th week of release, so Inside Out 2 also doing incredibly well, $626 million domestically. This number here that I think is the most interesting to me, because if Inside Out 2, as of right now, if Deadpool Wolverine is tracking ahead of Inside Out 2, and that's not just at the global box office, but also at the domestic box office, could we potentially see a film like Deadpool Wolverine get upwards of 600 plus million? I think it's definitely a possibility, especially because of a specific movie that's being mentioned in the same breath as Deadpool Wolverine as a rated R movie, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. But I did want to round off by saying, rounding off the top, really 6 here is a new film. That's the only reason why I'm mentioning it, is Harold and the Purple Crayon from Sony. I said that this didn't really look like it had a whole lot going for it. Sure enough, $6 million, not a whole lot there. So this film not likely going to make its money back, though again, I've also, for this movie, heard it's actually not too bad. It's actually a pretty good family movie. But as we've learned with films like IF, right, Imaginary Friend, or If, as I had been calling it, these original kids movies haven't really been doing all that well. And again, I think it's a part of the marketing. It's also kind of a sign of where we are at the box office right now. Unfortunately, the only films that seem to be doing much of anything are movies that are sequels based off of previous material or have some other factor going on, some other X factor going on for it. And it's, again, interesting that even this, as a based off of a very famous book, is not being able to get at least that kind of a lift because of that in any way. And so, again, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't say to whether or not this film deserves to make money or not, but did want to mention it nonetheless. Going into the individual releases, looking globally, again, Deadpool Wolverine, just insane numbers there, $824 million. Again, massive advantage right now domestically versus Inside Out 2, and I imagine internationally would probably be pretty similar. We got Twisters at $274 million worldwide. Again, very, very good. However, because of its massive budget, and again, if you look at this right here, it's giving you the $200 million budget. Remember that this did get a tax credit. I believe it brought it down to around 155. It's still a far, far away. It's still far, far away from its break-even point, and I just don't think it's going to hit that at the actual theaters themselves. The film Trap at $20 million worldwide. Again, better than what many people may have expected for this movie. The film did still cost about $40 million, if I remember correctly. We'll get into that in the charting. So it still has a chance, you could say, but definitely not as strong as one would want to have or want to see at this point of release. Despicable Me 4 at $752.2 million. Again, still doing very, very well. I doubt $1 billion is going to happen for this movie, but still the fact that it is going to probably get in that $850 million plus range, still a pretty good release. Inside Out 2 at $1.55 billion. So yeah, this movie is going to be able to cross to $1.6 billion. And again, look at this massive international and domestic run. It'll be interesting to see where Deadpool Wolverine actually falls besides this movie, because as I'd mentioned, because of how it's tracking and how much higher it's tracking 2 weeks in, will we see this continue to hold in the 3rd week of release? It's one of those rare circumstances where we actually have to go past the 2nd week of release because of where this movie currently is standing. Inside Out 2 had insane holds in those 3rd, 4th, 5th weeks of release. Are we going to see something similar with Deadpool Wolverine? As of right now, there's nothing to indicate it won't happen. But again, it's a very, very difficult time at the market, the box office market these days, to make those kinds of predictions based on the numbers that we are seeing. Harold the Purple Crayon only getting to $9 million. All right, let's jump over the chart. We love charts here. on OMB Reviews. And based off of the fact that Deadpool and Wolverine, let's make some projections. The only film in the second week of release that we can talk about is Deadpool Wolverine. So at $824 million after 2 weeks. And again, insane number there. As far as 2 week numbers are concerned, it's again $100 million higher than currently the highest grossing film of the year, which is Inside Out 2. So I think there is a lot of there's a lot of things that can be said about that. And then it is also the highest second weekend total we've had in 2024. So will this leg out to bring it to the highest box office of 2024? At the very least, it'll be either first or second based on the numbers that we're currently seeing. But because of this, based off of typical historical standards, so again, this is based off of math. This is based off of the fact that most films make about 70 to 50% of their entire box office in their first 2 weeks. We can project now this film will safely make between 1.1, roughly 1.2 when you round up, $billion, and then upwards of $1.6 billion. So we already know that when it comes to the holds for Inside Out 2, that movie has doubled, more than doubled the amount of money that it's made. That's why it's actually a chart breaker, right? It's well over the $1.4 billion that was originally projected as its high point. And so could we see something similar for Deadpool Wolverine as a rated R film? Again, as a Marvel film, doesn't seem as likely to happen. But no one really thought that this film was going to have the kind of opening weekend that it had, or that it's going to have the type of second weekend that it's had. So again, it's really going to be hard to see where this film ends up in the long run. But either way, they're making some mass profits off of this movie, even though they put a ton of money into it. But that's 1.1 or roughly 1.2 billion to 1.6. I mean, again, where does this film fall? I think this film probably gets closer to 1.4, 1.5 billion. And then that would, again, leave Inside Out 2 as being the highest grossing. But again, sky is the limit for Deadpool Wolverine, so anything could really happen at this point based off of the actual raw projections as far as what the estimated total returns are going to be. Using the standard 2.5 multiplier, that would be around 400 to 600, roughly $700 million in net profits. And again, I can't, unfortunately, do any further analysis than that because, as you can see, everything says not available because the numbers site is broken. I don't know exactly what's going on with that. What I can say is before, even today, I was looking at the chart when it was active, when the numbers wasn't going through a hissy fit at this point, that Deadpool Wolverine has already made its money back, is already making profit, and that's just been added on even more with just how much money this film has made in the different places, in the different markets. So we'll actually go ahead and just do this live, so that way we actually can at least look at this number. I can't do it for every single movie, but I can at least do it for the films that we have in front of us. So let's go ahead and put that number in for the domestic. Let's see, 428.5 international. Let me just double check here. Let's see what China's is. China's is $24 million. So, of course, always have to account for that because they get a lot less back on that in the long run. Also, glad I brought that screen up because it reminds me there's another metric that's going to make me think getting 600 plus million domestic for this movie is actually something that I think is definitely on the table. So anyway, we got that number. We now got the 428.5. As you can see, I'm trying to work through this in real time for you guys. And as you can see, based on the numbers we have right now, in actual real raw net gains, $95 million. So this film has already made $100 million back, and it's only been out for 2 weeks. So you can see why we think and project this movie is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars in net profits for Disney because of where it's making its money and how much money it is actually making in the long run. And going back to that domestic one more time. So the other thing that I thought was going to be interesting was to put this up against The Passion, okay? Because it was Tony at Deadline who said, Deadpool Wolverine officially crosses as being the most successful rated R film domestically, passing The Passion of the Christ. And immediately I was like, okay, Tony, I know for a fact you did not actually adjust for inflation or look at even ticket sales or anything like that. And sure enough, nay, Tony. Nay, not yet. But could it happen? It definitely could. So as of right now, Deadpool Wolverine's domestic total is at 395.5. Now the unadjusted numbers for The Passion, which came out in 2004, was around $370 million. Okay, so if you again compare those two numbers, not really comparing apples to apples there because those are again the value of the dollar very different than what it was back in 2004. Let alone average ticket prices as well. And so that means when you adjust for inflation, that actually means The Passion would, in today's dollars, be around $607 million by the end of its run. So Deadpool Wolverine, I think, has a chance of actually being, on paper, raw, the actual highest grossing rated R film in the domestic market. It just isn't there at this point. Even if you don't like inflation, though this is just domestically, even if you don't like inflation, and you would rather just look at things like ticket prices or ticket sales, by the end of its run, The Passion had sold roughly 60 million tickets in the domestic market alone. Okay, so Deadpool Wolverine currently is at 30 million, so it's only at the halfway point. So could Deadpool Wolverine double where it's gotten so far? Yes, just like we went back and talked about how Inside Out 2 was able to more than double its numbers after the first 2 weeks. Deadpool Wolverine could do the same thing, but it's this adjusted number, 607, is the reason why I think 600 plus million at the domestic box office for Deadpool Wolverine is still absolutely right now a possibility. And the more that these days go by and these numbers continue to roll in, I think is a very strong likelihood. So when do you think this film is going to hit to $1 billion? Again, I think on paper, we're going to get some very strong Monday, Tuesday numbers. So I think we'll get very close to $900 million in that capacity. I think we'll probably get closer to 950 when those domestic numbers come in by those Thursday numbers. So I think it won't be until next weekend proper, maybe that Friday numbers or Saturday numbers come in, that we'll actually get to $1 billion. But yeah, Deadpool Wolverine crossing $1 billion in 3 weeks. Guess what? So did Inside Out 2. So where do you think this film is going to end up there? When does it make $1 billion? Where do you think this film is going to stand against Inside Out 2? Again, right now, I'm thinking probably between 1.2 and 1.5 billion, if I had to guess based on the numbers that we're seeing right now. Do you think they could make more than that? Let me know in the comment section down below. And also, try to justify your thoughts there. I had a lot of people that are kind of lowballing this movie. There's really nothing to base that off of on the numbers that we're actually getting in front of us right now. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Loud that fire button over on Aussie. Smash the rumble button as well. Thank you all for putting up with me today as I am dealing with some illness. Hopefully you're not hearing it as much in my voice as I'm hearing it myself, especially as I get to the end of this video. But you guys are amazing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, Subscribe Star, Locals, and YouTube members who are at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Starting off with my Patreon supporters, Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, which is Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. To my Subscribe Star Chosen members, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, and also the K-Man, check him out at xtheboundaries.co, and a shout out also to my one Chosen of Valhalla YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Thank you again for being so much of a huge supporter of the channel. And to every one of my chosen members, if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, or if you want access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc., and access to an exclusive podcast bonus material for members, check out the links in the video description below for all of those details. You guys are amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed month of the Sacred Heart, and as always, God bless.